Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today because we are diving headfirst into one of the most misunderstood yet absolutely fascinating debates in ancient history. We're looking at the book of Job. But hey, we aren't just looking at the story of a guy who lost everything. Nope. Today we are putting his friends under the microscope. This whole thing is essentially a masterclass in how you can have the completely right theology on paper, but apply it so poorly that you literally miss the entire point. It's a story about justice, human pride, and the extreme limits of what we actually understand. So let's get into it.
Think about this for a second. When tragedy strikes, why are we always so desperate to find someone to blame? It's kind of just a universal human instinct, isn't it? We want the world to make sense. We want it to be predictable. Now, in our inciting incident here, Job loses everything. His wealth, his health, and tragically, his kids. It is a catastrophic, unimaginable loss. And almost immediately, human nature just kicks right in. The people around him want to know why. They're scrambling to solve the puzzle of his pain.
Section 1. The universal problem of suffering. Okay, so we really have to look at how this story actually starts to see exactly where things go so terribly, terribly wrong. Day 1, tragedy strikes. Job is absolutely ruined. But fast forward to day 7, for a whole week, Job's friends actually do something profoundly right. They show up, they sit in the ashes with him, and they mourn in total, complete silence. It's beautiful. They perfectly embody compassion. But then, day 8 rolls around. The explanations begin. And honestly, the very second they open their mouths to try and explain his pain with absolute certainty, they totally ruin the whole thing. Section 2. The core theological error.
So, what exactly was the massive structural mistake these guys made when they tried to solve the so-called problem of pain? Well, they were operating on a very specific definition, the doctrine of retribution. Basically, this is the belief that God always blesses righteous people materially and always punishes wicked people visibly, right here in this life. Now, what's really interesting about this foundational assumption is how perfectly logical it seems on the surface. I mean, we all inherently want to believe that if you do good, good things happen, and if you do bad, bad things happen, right? It's predictable. But as we're going to see, relying on this as some absolute unbreakable law is fundamentally flawed.
This perfectly illustrates the massive trap they fell into. You see, there is a general principle that wisdom typically leads to flourishing. And hey, that is true. The book of Proverbs teaches this exact pattern. Sin often produces destruction. But these friends, they took that general principle and totally twisted it into an absolute law. They decided that all suffering must be a direct punishment for sin. Job's friends basically weaponized partial truths. They took a general proverb about how the world tends to work and turned it into this cold, mechanical guarantee. But here is the crazy part, the ultimate dramatic irony hanging over this whole explainer. We, the readers, already know something the friends totally don't. Job is innocent. Heaven literally already declared it back in the first 2 chapters. God himself called Job blameless and upright. So we just have to sit back and watch these friends confidently and honestly pretty arrogantly argue something that the text has already explicitly told us is false. Section 3, Profiles in Bad Advice. Let's put their logic on the stand, shall we? Let's break down these 3 distinct personas side by side. First up, we've got Eliphaz, the mystical traditionalist. He uses true biblical themes like human impurity, but he weaponizes them. He assumes he has perfect knowledge of God's purpose, basically implying Job must be secretly wicked behind closed doors. Then there's Bildad, the traditional legalist. This guy is rigid. He literally tells Job that his children died because of their own sin. I mean, he is incredibly cruel, all in the name of truth. And finally, Zophar, the dogmatic accuser. He's the harshest of the bunch. He actually insists Job deserves worse than he's getting. Unbelievable. He entirely prioritized being right over showing an ounce of compassion. And notice this, as the text goes on, their certainty grows, but their actual accuracy just shrinks. The absolute crucial point here is that their rigid little law left absolutely zero room for the actual messy complexity of human existence. I mean, look at what they completely ignored. Innocent suffering, spiritual warfare, testing and refinement, divine mystery, and delayed judgment. They just wanted a predictable, mathematically sound universe that was easy to explain. They literally couldn't compute a world where God's purposes extend way, way beyond human comprehension. So how does Job handle all this terrible advice coming at him? Well, he actually gets a lot of it right. He absolutely refused to accept their false guilt. He defended his integrity, and he maintained a brutally honest lament before God. And the text validates this. But, his intense anguish did lead to a bit of an overreach. He kind of drifted into self-righteousness.
He got dangerously close to accusing God of unfairness, demanding explanations as though the creator of the universe somehow owed him a briefing. So Job was definitely much more right than his friends, but he wasn't perfectly right either. Then, right before the climax, we get this huge pivot. Enter Elihu, this younger observer who's been listening the whole time. Elihu steps in and radically expands the view of suffering. He argues, hey, suffering isn't just a punishment for hidden sin. It can actually be preventive. It can refine us, instruct us, and reveal things to us. He emphasizes humility and really sets the stage for the ultimate plot twist. Section 4. God's Final Verdict. And here is where the supreme judge enters the chat. And God doesn't do what anyone expects here. He doesn't just hand Job an itemized list of reasons for his suffering. Nope. Instead, God fires back with a series of overwhelming questions, starting with the big one. Were you there at creation? God challenges the very capacity of a human being to understand cosmic realities. And the point isn't to crush or humiliate Job. The point is to reveal that human perspective is radically, fundamentally limited. God is just infinitely wiser than our little human systems. And then comes the absolute shock of the verdict. God turns to those three friends and says, "You have not spoken of me what is right as my servant Job has." Wow, God actually rebukes his own self-appointed defenders. He completely condemns the friends who tried to reduce his providence to a neat little formula, and he validates the honest, messy, agonizing lament of the sufferer. It turns out honest wrestling with God is so much better than false certainty about God.
Section 5. The deeper meaning. So what does this all mean for us? What are the practical takeaways from this massive ancient debate? Let's quickly synthesize this into a few core lessons. Number 1, suffering is not always punishment for personal sin. 2, compassion matters way, way more than quick explanations. Silence and presence will beat theological analysis every single time. 3, human wisdom is radically limited. 4, honest lament is permitted. Biblical faith isn't about slapping a smile on and suppressing your emotions. And finally, God's sovereignty totally exceeds our formulas. The text demands theological humility over religious certainty. And what's amazing is how this ancient text actually foreshadows a much grander biblical narrative down the line: Jesus Christ. Think about it. Christ is completely sinless, yet he suffers horribly on the cross. This ultimate act completely destroys the friends' rigid theology. If Job's friends were actually right and all suffering automatically proved divine rejection and guilt, well, then Christ himself would appear condemned. But the greatest suffering in all of history fell upon a completely sinless man, which completely shatters that doctrine of absolute retribution forever. Which brings us to the central danger we still see all the time today. Truth without mercy just becomes cruelty. Those friends said a lot of things that were individually true on paper, but truth ripped out of its proper context and stripped of love just becomes a weapon. They treated a hurting, suffering human being like a theological puzzle to be solved, rather than a person to be loved and comforted. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. When tragedy strikes someone in your life, and it will you offer an explanation or will you offer your presence? Are you going to try to be the hero with a quick, neat answer, or will you be brave enough to sit in the ashes, in the quiet, messy mystery of pain, and just be a friend? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep learning, stay curious, and always lead with compassion.